how did you get Crohn's and colitis in the first place? You see, your doctor probably told you it's this genetic, autoimmune, random condition, but that is not true. And so today I'm going to be showing you why and how you got IBD to begin with. And I'm going to help you understand the origin story to help you find your root cause. We're going to talk about the different tests that you can get done to start identifying some of those root causes based on the origin, and of course the steps that are required to begin reversing IBD naturally. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Josh Deck. I'm a Crohn's and colitis specialist and a physician's consultant for complex gut diseases, and I do these videos so that you can learn how to heal your gut naturally, because the world is wrong about Crohn's and colitis, and you do not have to be stuck with it. So here's the first thing we're going to start with. You see this big chart behind me. We're going to be getting into the different stages of IBD, the different immune pathways that are activated. We're going to talk about the things that are causing that to be active and what symptoms you might have. You might be going, Josh, how does this make any sense? Why do I need this information? Here's why. We can identify what stage of bowel disease you're in. Now I have a whole talk on just the stages, but we're going to talk about these briefly. Once we understand what part of your immune system is activated, we can then say, okay, here are the things that drive that pathway of your immune system. So here's the things that cause blood. Here's the things that cause ulcers. Here's the things that cause fatigue. Once we have that, we can look at your symptoms, and from there, we can use this to identify, here are the tests we can be doing, and then this is what we can do to now identify a root cause. That's sort of the process I'm walking you through. So a couple of things we want to start with on the top. You may have heard me talk about these before. If not, keep watching other videos, podcasts, I got you. IBD is not random. Okay, we get sick for three main reasons. The first is going to be a combination. Well, I guess the first is all the three things. Is a combination of toxins, microbes, deficiencies. Now, toxins are like anything and everything. So that's mold, heavy metals, chronic stress, poor diet, chronically high blood sugar, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, indoor recycled air, all kinds of stuff that can be toxic to the human body. Mostly unnatural stuff as well. The second thing that makes us sick is microbes. Now, these are viruses, bacteria, fungus, and parasites. The third is deficiencies. You have toxins, you have microbes, and deficiencies. Now the deficiencies are basic stuff, right? Vitamins, minerals, amino acids, but things like sunlight, fresh air, exercise, deficiency in your gut-brain connection, deficiency of immune regulation, deficiency of sleep, deficiency of these things that we need to thrive and survive is what makes us sick. So we're going to talk about a couple different things here. I'm going to get you into some immune stuff we're going to be talking about here. Let me just clear a square. So I want to talk about the different pathways that are implicated in IBD. And again, you might be going, why do I care? Each pathway tends to be, it's not linear and perfect, but they tend to be activated by specific things. Therefore, when you have certain sets of symptoms, we can identify what is probably causing your IBD based on those symptoms. So for example, we have different immune pathways. They're called TH. This is your TH, T helper. T helper cells, part of the immune system. So we have a couple numbers. We have TH1, we're going to go with 2, and these are pretty deeply implicated, but the others we're talking about are 9, 17, and 22. Now, number 1, number 17, and number 2 are the most common we see in IBD, but number 9 and 22 kind of get in there, okay? So here's what number 1 does. Number 1, TH1, this is going to be acute stuff. So acute viral infections or intracellular microbes, short-term exposure to like toxins in your gut, ate something you shouldn't, burst of bacteria. That's kind of your short-term stuff. This is a pro-inflammatory response. It inflames you, okay? The second one we have is TH2. This is going to be for chronic stuff. Now you might notice, look, acute, chronic, acute, chronic. So we're going to be talking about the progression here. So we have acute as your number 1. Your number 2 pathway is chronic stuff. This is where we're seeing mold, mycotoxins, helminths or worms, which are parasites. Certain allergens will typically drive this number 2. They can also drive number 17. Okay? So number 9, again, this is going to be things like mold and parasites. That's a big one there. And number 17 is like fungus, dysbiosis, bacterial stuff. So we're going to put microbes here, being that's your bacteria and fungi. And then of course we have 22. Now this is microbial stressors, things like LPS, that's lipopolysaccharide or toxins, which are produced from your gut bacteria. So if we have any cell fragments from fungus that's broken apart, if you have injury to the gut lining, your intestinal barrier, this pathway, this Th22. So you can see here, we have an acute, a chronic, and some long-term stuff. We see activations in certain pathways. So if we identify and go, okay, well, number 2 and 17, what are these gonna do? Well, number 2, I can have histamine overload, allergies, eczema, asthma. What causes number 2 and number 17? Number 2, we're looking at things like mold, mycotoxins, parasites, other allergens. So if you have symptoms like histamines, mast cell activation syndrome, allergies, eczema, asthma, it can be a number 2, which again means maybe it's mold or maybe it's parasites, right? So we're looking at the symptoms. We know what microbes, toxins, deficiencies cause this type of reaction, which are connected to this pathway. These are the things that stimulate that pathway, therefore your root cause is. That's what we're doing here. Let's go back to 1. Number 1, chronic mold. Weak clearance of pathogens is one of the symptoms you'll be experiencing. Maybe viruses are popping up like Epstein-Barr, HSV, or herpes simplex virus. Different things are popping up. You're like, oh, I'm getting the flu all the time. This can be damage to number 1. Well, things that damage number 1, again, LPS, we see some of that, or microbe toxins, bacterial things, viral things. Cool? Number 9, mold and parasites. Well, if you're experiencing some of this, what happens? Well, histamine, mast cell, gut hypersensitivity, certain foods really wreck your gut. These are certain things we experience. Well, mold, parasites, and certain antigens we can see drive this. So if you have those symptoms, here's your root cause, right? Now again, it's not a one-to-one, but this is what we're getting at. If we have a number 17 activation, what causes this? Well, fungal toxins like gliotoxins, we're talking about mold, bacterial dysbiosis or bacterial biofilms, which are these mucus layers bacteria produce. So if you have that, it triggers this pathway, which gives you symptoms like autoimmunity and tissue damage, ulcers, fistulas, strictures. That's that progressed aversion. If you have those, well, you may have fungus, dysbiosis, something else, or even parasites and mold. Number 22, if you see these types of symptoms, if you have things like chronically damaged epithelium or tissue inside of your bowel, if you feel that there's some fibrosis or mucus overgrowth, these types of things can be a drive here. What does that? Well, microbes, stressors like toxins, fungal cell wall fragments like we talked about, where you have lots of fungus in your system, can drive that. So based on your symptoms, here's the immune pathway. Here's the thing that causes that immune pathway, therefore that's your root cause, okay? Now again, it's not linear, but it's pretty cool stuff when you break it down a little bit differently. So let's get into some of these here. We'll talk about this together, because this is just a different way of looking at IBD, and right now, to my knowledge, there's very few people kind of doing this. And I want to make it more mainstream, because once we can understand your symptoms, this is symptomatology, here's what it does to your immune system, here's the thing it produces, here's your root cause. And we just follow this chain. Root cause, immune trigger, symptoms. We reverse engineer, okay? So let's talk about this. Now, we have 4 stages of IBD. Acute, immune mediated, well, actually, it should be actually backwards. This is my bad, guys. I'm gonna put here, chronic, immune mediated, okay? So here's what we look at. Acute. This is something where, hey, I'm having a stressful day. I can get over that, no big deal. Th1 and 2 are acute. So again, that's going to be like your pro-inflammatory, and it's going to be antibody-mediated type responses, which can be kind of chronic, but you get histamine issues, skin rashes, quick reactions to certain things. That's what's happening here. Acute is one stressful day, your body reacts to it. No big deal. The problem is you have IBD. That's why you're here, right? So it didn't just have you one stressful day. It went on and on and on. And you got more and more stressed out. Now you're just really irritable. This is your chronic pathway, okay? Chronic. When you're having a chronically stressful time, your body upgrades the response to mucosal barrier stuff, to gut junction issues, to that leaky gut stuff. It gets upgraded. It goes from bad to worse. This is chronic. The problem is, after something goes from a short-term stressor to over and over and over, you're getting hammered by it, it then becomes immune-mediated. This is actually what the Crohn's Colitis Foundation, the CDC, the Mayo Clinic even have downgraded Crohn's colitis largely to being immune-mediated. They're no longer saying, well, it's autoimmune. They're saying immune-mediated. Think about it. You go from acute, one stressful day, you shake it off, you're fine. It's like you getting the flu, right? No biggie. But then that happens over and over and over and over. You're a little tightly wound, right? You're a little bit irritable. And then one day you freaking snap and just like kick the mailman and punch the neighbor's cat and you're just throwing a fit. Immune mediated. Your responses are hyperactive or hyperreactive. And so now you're getting things like ulcers and fistulas and strictures, and things are getting worse and worse and worse. This is your immune mediated response. This is going to be a persistent issue with this Th17 pathway we talked about, okay? And it's going to be Th22, which is again a persistent issue of the last one. So it went from bad to worse to double plus worse. That's what's happening now. And then we also get a deficiency of what's called Treg. And you're like, Josh, you didn't tell me about Treg. We talked about numbers 1, 2, 9, 17, 22. What's Treg? Well, remember, these are TH, T helper. It's one of your immune cells, right? T helper cell. Treg is T regulatory. It's kind of like the boss. It keeps these guys in checks and balance. Said, hey, you react, you chill. Do this, do that. So when you have these hyperactive responses that go beyond the norm, you have a deficiency of regulation. They can't be regulated anymore. So now they're going crazy. That's that response. Until eventually, hopefully not, things sort of collapse. And this is what we have as our last one. So you have a bad day, you get really tightly wound, you snap, and then you're just like rocking yourself in the corner trying to like just hope to God everything passes by and you lose your mind, right? Now you're in a rubber padded room. And that's what happens to the immune system, it collapses. And this is where we see things like CIRS, for example, or chronic inflammatory response syndrome. We see a lot of these types of issues, or true autoimmunity even. And what we end up seeing here is, again, an even low Treg. So our regulatory pathways are completely just basically blown. And we have sort of a skewing of our responses, right? Our different immune responses are skewed. So they're all over the place. One's hyperactive, one's kind of underactive. They don't know what to do. We have suppression of certain pathways of our immune system that just, they're suppressed. They just can't come back up. So your body can't defend itself, right? So what does this mean for us? We talked about acute. This is an acute trigger of some kind. So when we're seeing 1 and 2, what is that going to mean? Well, we talked about some basic infections, right? We talked about microbes. And we know that 2 can also be driven by things like mold, right? We also have other things. Maybe it's going to be NSAIDs. Those are like Advil, ibuprofen, those types of things that can drive this up. Chronic stress, some sort of trauma can drive these types of responses in acute. What does that mean for you? Well, you're going to have inflammatory symptoms, right? A lot of pain, inflammation. You're going to have diarrhea. You're going to get blood in the stool. We're going to see a fair bit of that as well, right? So you get these reactive type responses. Maybe you have a fever, reactive inflammation. You eat something, then boom, you balloon, right? And we look at the second one, chronic, which is going to be your 17-22 pathways, which is fungus, microbes, gut barrier issues, those types of things. So what causes those? Typically LPS, that's from bacterial overgrowth. We have a lot of that, or we call it dysbiosis. Maybe you have a loss of tolerance. So you're like, man, I'm just getting sick all the time. I'm so prone to like fatigue. I'm so prone to getting the flu. I'm the friend who's always sick. You could be seeing some of that. We also have what's called tissue remodeling. And this can happen in chronic stages. And we have like architectural changes. Instead of a smooth bowel, you have lumps and bumps and scar tissue and ulcers and fistulas and things burrowing, tunneling. These are structural architectural changes to the tissues. So we get these chronic ongoing symptoms. And if it progresses and progresses, right, we're going to go into this immune-mediated responses, right? This is where we're getting more of these. We're getting them, they're going to be way worse than they were before. And we get ongoing flares. We get more of this stuff now. And you're super reactive to your flares. They're hyperactive or hyperreactive. You're getting deep, deep ulcerations, deep, deep fistulas. You're getting such a poor resilience, you just inflame all the time until your immune system collapses. This is where we're going to be into a multi-system issue. So now you're someone who's got maybe multiple autoimmune conditions. Maybe you've got MCAS. That's going to be mast cell activation syndrome. Maybe you're sitting here with like that's histamine issues. You get bone broth, or you have an allergy response, you get bit by a mosquito and it balloons, right? These types of things can be part of this. Or even worse, poor healing, tissue and wound healing, and you're unresponsive to medication. We can see a fair bit of that down here when that immune system collapses. Because all these things that are supposed to protect you can't. And that's where we end up here. Okay, so you have inflammation, diarrhea, blood, these types of things. And then you end up with these like ongoing flares, immune responses, etc. You end up with escalating immune responses, right? So things get a little bit worse, you're a little bit more reactive. And then we get remodeling. We have things starting to change. Your tissues actually become, instead of again, this nice smooth bowel, maybe you're somebody who's got these lumps and strictures and fistulas and you get polyps and all kinds of stuff hanging out inside your bowels until you collapse. So this is really the root cause origin. What we're looking to do is say, okay, what are my symptoms? If that's a symptom, it means this immune pathway is activated. What things activate that pathway? Once I understand that, now I can say, what testing can I do? And this is where things get really, really interesting. So let's talk about this. When we're dealing with IBD, we want to get to your origins. And I'm going to tell you how you can begin reversing this. So let's talk about an origin. That's the first thing I have to identify. When I get on a call with somebody who's a prospective client, wants to join a program, the first thing I start to ask is like, tell me about your symptoms. Because in my brain, I'm going, here are your symptoms. Here's the thing that creates those symptoms. Once I have that information, we're off to the races, right? But we got to talk about that. So once we can identify your symptoms, the next thing I want to know, I'm going to give you guys this in order, a different way, is the origins. Where did it come from? When did this start? Now, I'm not talking like, well, you know, I'm 40 years old and I've started bleeding on a Tuesday. That's not what I'm asking, right? What I'm asking is, when was the first illness, the first thing you had? Oh, well, I go back to when I was 2 years old. I had tonsillitis chronically. I had asthma as a child. I was on antibiotics. There we go. That's the original root. Or I had some kind of gut issue. I had inflammation. I had anxiety. I had the skin thing, but then it went away. And then. And what we do is we build a story. Once we can establish a timeline of events, I don't care if it was right back to birth. I've taken people back and said, okay, so you were born C-section. You didn't have any microbes there. You were bottle fed in part or in full, so we lost some microbes there. You had chronic tonsil issues and ear infections. That's probably mold in the home. We see that a lot with kids. And you had these ear infections, so you were given antibiotics. Noted. And then what started happening throughout childhood, you developed asthma. Okay, that's gut inflammation, which can be again from the mold, or it could be a bacterial issue. And so then you had this asthma condition that went on, you developed anxiety, and you developed eczema and psoriasis. Guess what? Now we're dealing with those same Th2 type pathways, Th17. What causes that? Mold, parasites, bacterial issues, etc. And so that's where I get my origin. So where did it come from? When was the first illness that you had? And you map out each illness, each intervention, each medical intervention, each dose of drugs, each surgery, every dose of antibiotics, and what happened next. Once we have that, then we know the timeline of events. So we can pinpoint, here's what started, here's what entered your system at what point, and then we can identify what sort of things need to come out to empty your glass, so to speak. Okay? So we go through an origin, and then we go through in order. When was the first sickness or illness you had? What was the order that got us to where you are today? Okay, let's go from past to present. Make a timeline of events. Now, when you have that, we have to ask a question, because some people come in like, no, I was actually perfectly healthy. I've seen this before. I was perfectly healthy till one day I wasn't. Now, you might be going, well, my gut's my gut. No. Like we just talked about, eczema, psoriasis, not sleeping, grinding your teeth at night, fatty foods are a problem, hormonal issues, thyroid issues, skin problems, body odors, all these things are symptoms. Here's the thing, when you and I talk together, we've probably shared thousands of words on this call. If I just kind of sit here and ooga booga bang my chest, I'm not conveying anything to you. If you think about it, when we're talking about symptoms, your bowels have a little more than a dozen words, maybe 16 words, right? Gas, bloat, pain, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, blood, mucus, increase appetite, decrease appetite, what's that, 14, right? There's very few symptoms. And whether you have the stomach flu, or you have Crohn's or colitis, or IBS, or anything in between, you can have a wide array of those symptoms. Sometimes they're worse, sometimes they're not, right? So we have a lot of different things we can get, but there's only so many words: gas, bloat, pain, nausea, diarrhea, etc. The rest of your body gives us more vocabulary to work with, which builds a story. This is how we identify roots. So the question is, next is time. Was it quick? Like overnight, like, dude, I was perfectly healthy, no skin issues, no blood work, never had a medication, never had anything, never had a surgery, didn't even have my wisdom teeth taken out as a kid. Cool. So it's acute. Well, there's only two things that really are going to get you acutely. Either A, a really high toxic dose of some kind, and or B, we're going to have an issue with some sort of microbe. Parasites, fungus, bacterial infections, etc. that never got managed and just started wreaking havoc. So typically those who are perfectly healthy their entire lives, nothing ever, either A, their body kept on top of it as that glass slowly filled up to one day critical mass, it overflowed, or it was an acute infection, your doctor didn't see it, and things just got worse. Or you go, yeah, I went traveling, got really sick, had food poisoning, my body got over it. So you suppressed it. But that parasite, that bacteria, whatever, wreaked havoc slowly, eroded your foundation, and one day your house fell down and you went, oh, my house collapsed out of nowhere. Nope. There was a root. It was just being covered up. The second one is it happened slowly over time. Like this story. Tonsillitis, mold, bottle-fed, antibiotics, etc. that slowly eroded your immune system, your gut integrity, your gut lining, your microbiome, until your symptoms either progressed or seemingly came out of nowhere, and pop goes the weasel. Now you got IBD. It came from somewhere, right? The last thing we're going to look at is, now that we've identified this, how can we ID or test? Well, once we've looked at your symptoms, we can use that to identify the common root cause. Once we have that, we can use to identify the testing we need for that root cause. So once we've identified and said, okay, well, I know where it came from. I see the order of things I have right now. So maybe I've got a combination of fungus and dysbiosis and immune dysfunction and chronic stress. My diet is poor, blood sugar issues. Maybe I'm eating poorly. I'm not sleeping very well. I've got parasitic infections. Well, I don't care how many you got, right? We can identify it. Then we can get an order of things and decide what needs to come out first. Based on that, we can do testing, or just looking at your symptoms, like 99.5% chance you got parasites. Well, the best tests are basically 40% accurate anyway, so do we want to bother testing, or just put that time and money and effort into the parasite protocol itself, right? We say, well, it sounds like it's probably mold. We can do a mycotoxin or urine test. It's probably heavy metals. You can do an HTMA, or a hair tissue mineral analysis, or what's called a total tox test, which just kind of does all your environmental, glyphosate, pesticides, microplastics, mold, metals, the works. So there's different labs we can utilize. The big ones we tend to use in our practice are things like OAT. That's going to be an organic, OAT, organic acid test. We'll tend to use mycotoxin test, or that total tox, which does mold, metals, environmental. We often will use a GI map. We look at blood samples, but our best test, the best test we can do is a thorough history. 9 times out of 10, your story, your symptoms, your origins, the timeline of events give us everything that we need to identify those root causes. So I promised you a step to reverse, and you can look this up through YouTube, my podcast. You guys hear banging on the floor over there. I have a little puppy who's chewing on a toy. But we walk through the 5 R's. I'll give them to you briefly, but check out the other video for the more detailed version of this, okay? So it's what we call the 5 R's. Which is really like D plus 5 R's. Oftentimes we'll either do drainage, it's called, which is getting junk out of your body, or we'll do sort of like an immune or an inflammatory control first, depending on the severity. But then we jump right to 5 R's. 5 R's are simple. Number 1, remove. Remove the problem. The toxin microbe deficiency, the insult, the thing that is actively harming your system, we got to get rid of it. If you're not sleeping, we got to fix that. You're eating poorly, we got to fix that. We have to remove the problem. Then we have to replenish. Replenish what? Well, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, sleep, right? Quality things, gut-brain connection. Replenish the basics your body has been deficient on. So remember, we're sick for 3 reasons, right? Toxins, microbes, deficiencies. So we have to remove the toxin, we have to remove the microbe, or remove the deficiency of whatever that is. And part of that deficiency is going to be in replenish, which means number 3 is going to be a different step. Now we're adding in the repair. Well, repair what? Microbiome, right? Repair and rebuild kind of go together, because your gut bacteria can't live in an environment that's all inflamed. Just like you wouldn't live in a house that's actively on fire. You wouldn't live inside of a house that's got holes in the roof and there's no windows, there's a breeze coming through. It's not a habitable place to grow comfortably and safely and happily. Your gut needs the same. Leaky gut, extreme inflammation, microbes, parasites, mold, like the terrain is not healthy, your bacteria won't grow, but bad guys will. Right? A house full of holes got raccoons. You don't want raccoons in your belly. Same kind of concept. So we have to rebuild and repair. Rebuild and repair the gut microbiome, the gut lining, the tissues, and of course, because your immune system, in that immune-mediated response we talked about our chart, as things get progressed, what do? We have to, of course, this is going to be 3 and 4, this means this one's 5, which means we rejuvenate the immune system. Oftentimes you think, oh, I got to boost my immune system. I'll try this mushroom, I'll try that supplement, I'll try this thing to boost. Well, we talked about immune-mediated responses and immune collapse and all these things. If you're collapsed and dysregulated and you boost dysregulation a lot of the time. So you have to know what pathway you're boosting, which creates rejuvenation or balance. And this is the way we walk through it, whether you're long-term or short-term. And oftentimes you have to go through this. It's not uncommon someone comes through a program like this with me and my team who comes in. Great example, we have her on YouTube, Billie Jean. She had mold and parasites. Right? We didn't identify the parasites right away because there was so much active mold. We got the mold out of her system about 8 weeks in. For the first time in 15 years, she's like, I think come off my drugs and come off my Entyvio. I feel amazing. Symptoms are gone. I'm losing weight. My hair's growing. I feel really good. But guess what? She started getting rashes, hives, irritability, other things came up. Well, her immune system was able to work on and identify now those parasites. So we had to go back through the 5 R's. We removed the mold, replenished what was deficient, worked to rebuild the gut and balance the immune system, but our immune system reacted. So we went, oh shit, okay, let's remove the parasite now, then replenish what was lost from those and keep going in layers and layers and layers. And that is how we reverse IBD. Getting help is easy. Right? I know today's conversation might have felt a little overwhelming. Right? We're pushing into almost 30 minutes now. It can feel like it's too heavy, like it's not making sense to you, and that's okay. I have countless videos on YouTube, podcasting. We've got 50 plus now that we're working on. If you have questions, comments, concerns, ask me, send me a DM. But if you're like, Josh, I get this. This whole 5R process kind of makes sense, but I've been sort of 5Ring myself for years. Like Heidi, my early 20s, I'm in my 40s at IBD. Well, okay, let's talk about it. What can we do to help? All you gotta do is check the links in the notes below. And there's a link in there, you can schedule a call with me, go to the website, like whatever. The calls, it's not like this arm twisting sales call. Like, all it is a conversation to say, hey, can we go through this process with you? Can we identify, one, your origins and your timeline? Can we look at the order of your symptoms? Can we identify that root cause? If we can, here's what it might look like. Here's the timeline I expect you to get better. We'll even go over budget with you and say, hey, here's how long I expect this to take. Here's what you'll probably spend on tests. Here's what tests you might need. Here's what you'll probably spend on supplements. And we build out a plan for you on the spot and say, here's what it looks like. Does this feel like a good fit for you? Let's talk. And we can do that on a call, and that call is free. Just check the link in the show notes below, and you can book a call and we'll go through that process together.